Happy Friday, everyone. It's Richard Skipper, and I want to know what's on your mind. Today, we're going to talk about customer service. We're going to talk about whatever is on the minds of all of my guests today. There's a lot on my mind right now. We've got an inauguration coming in, and that set everybody off on both sides of the equation. I read an article today that it was an interview with Sally Struthers, and she was very honest about the way she's been treated in this business. And that's set off a lot of people. People are talking about the fact that she should not be talking about people who are not here to defend themselves. What are your thoughts on that? I've got my own thoughts on all of that. But as I said, today is Customer Service Day. And for years, I used to do a lot of temp work, and I was always brought in as a customer service representative. And the one rule that I learned always is it's always about the customer. And when you treat others the way that you want to be treated, it will turn everything around. I'm so excited about our guest today, and nobody knows who's going to be brought on first. I'm randomly pulling a name, and so I hope you're all ready. Nod if you are. And I'm going to bring on our first guest, and that's Elana Polin. How are you, Elana?
Hi, Richard. So nice to be here with you.
It's so nice to meet you. And you and I are actually new Facebook friends.
We are new Facebook friends, and yet I watched your program from last week, and I feel that we are connected more than just because we have a lot of friends in common,
Mhm.
but because of something you kind of said on the side. You brought up what Tyne Daly read at Carol Channing's funeral, and it is one of the little pieces that I have hanging in my room all the time.
That's amazing. Do you mind reading it?
I think it's the right piece. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped away into the next room. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effect, without the ghost of a shadow on it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolutely unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind? Because I am out of sight. I am but waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere, very near, just around the corner. All is well.
That's exactly it. Would you send that to me, please?
I absolutely will.
Wow. So thank you for reading that. But I want to ask, what's on your mind today?
Well, I have different titles like we all do.
Hmm.
Um, and one of my titles, and probably the most honored title I have, is mom. So I have three young adults, three young Gen Zers, two in the arts and one who's going into the sciences. And my heart right now is with the children of Altadena.
Yes.
Because I just don't know how, they're watching their parents' trauma, and that's what's going to be affecting them more than anything else. So I think I heard that 30,000 children are dealing with school disruption.
Mhm.
And I think it is so important that we keep these kids in whatever kind of school we can, because that will create normalcy for them to in this insanity. And I hope that, and I trust that my colleagues in the arts are stepping up and doing anything music or theater wise for them, because this will help them process and heal as best as possible.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting when you think about these kids. It was just a couple of years ago that they were displaced because of COVID.
Right.
And now this, and then we've got, God forbid that there be another school shooting somewhere, and kids are hearing these things on the news. I'm always reminded of Stephen Sondheim. Be careful the things you say, children will listen. And I think it's very important right now, especially, there's a lot of misinformation that's going out on social media right now. And I've seen pictures of the Hollywood sign burning to the ground. Fake news, everyone. I've seen photographs of the Sunset Boulevard sign in flames. Fake news, everyone. I've heard that people are being paid to go to the inauguration. Fake news, everyone. So we have to be very, very careful with what we are putting out there right now. None of us are responsible for what's happening, but we are responsible for how we respond to it. And I have to, from my own point of view, I live in an old house that was once a carriage barn. As I sit here, I'm surrounded by photographs and mementos of a lifetime, not only in my career, but in my personal life as well. And I can't even imagine losing all of this in something as devastating as a fire. Have you ever gone through anything as traumatic when it comes to a loss?
Oh, yes. You know, I was struck by what Jeffrey Marks said last week on your program about losing his partner of so many decades. But we can all lose people in different kinds of ways. And sometimes when you lose a person very slowly over a period of years, that can be losing a whole world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we are lucky enough to live to a certain age, we have experienced tremendous loss. And we're all walking around with stories, and it doesn't take much to find out what our stories are.
Well, I'll share something with you. My mom, believe it or not, was the oldest of 16.
Whoa, that's
Yes. So
amazing.
I come from a huge family, and my mom passed away suddenly in March of this past year. And since my mom passed away, two of her sisters passed away. So in my family, we've dealt with the loss of three sisters. And of course, I think of my mom's own brothers and sisters and going through this loss. The one thing, and I thank you for reading this. It's not a poem, but this reading that you read at the beginning of this. And it is so telling in terms of how we deal with this loss. And nothing, I mean, today is today. None of us have anything promised to us as we go into the next day and the day after that and the day after that. And so we deal with loss on a daily basis. And yet it's just a matter of how we learn to process that and how we deal with that. We're going to bring our next guest on in a moment, or you're going to help me bring on the next guest.
Okay.
So is there anything that you want to say to tie this up before I bring on the next guest?
I just love that you shared that you were one of 16 children.
No, my mom was.
Oh,
My mom.
your mom was one of 16. Forgive me, I misunderstood that. But that to me is just amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people, especially in the arts, because I'm one of very few people that I know that even have children. Most of my friends did not even
Right.
have children. So when I hear about these huge families, I just think, wow, what they did,
I
you
know, I know,
know?
I know.
And I understand how that gets done, that the older ones start to raise the younger ones. I
That's
get all of
exactly what when my dad passed away very quickly, when my father passed away, my mom said it was the first time in her life that she was on her own.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so that was amazing. So, Elena, I want you to help me bring on our next guest.
Okay.
So I have four other guests, and so pull a number 1 through 4, and we will pull up the next, and we'll keep this conversation going.
1.
And that is a man who I admire. I hear him every single week on his own radio program. Those of you who read my newsletter see that he is an active part of my newsletter each week because he has the Broadway radio show. And just to give a heads up, this Sunday, he is looking at the Fabulous Flops, part 1 of Fabulous Flops from the year 2010s. So that's where we're starting. So Donald, first of all, you can expound upon anything that Elena and I were talking about, or you can change the subject. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hi, Richard. Well, thank you for having me back. And hello from Los Angeles, land of brush fires.
Yes.
Everything is all good here these days. The winds have died down, thankfully, as of Wednesday afternoon. Things are much quieter, which is good. The fires are close to being contained, slowly but surely. So things are much better. It's been interesting and it kind of actually ties in with what had been on my mind, and because I've been thinking about it as to what I wanted to talk about. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was because it also ties in the fact that my birthday is coming up in a couple of weeks. And as you get older, one of the things that you start to understand is friendships. And as you get older, there's this syndrome that we kind of fall into, especially in the community, the gay community. It happens a lot, which is this kind of invisible, what I call it, and I explain to my younger friends, because I have a lot of friends who are younger, there's this invisible man syndrome that starts to happen as you get older, especially if you are single, which I am at the moment. You become invisible. And as you get older, it becomes more difficult to make new friends. And the friends you do have tend to forget about you, and you sort of vanish. They know you, they know you're there, and they reach out to you and when they need something and stuff. But when it comes to social gatherings or just a casual doing something on a weekend or whatever, they tend to forget you exist and you sort of disappear. And I know that becomes, I've discussed it with straight friends and other gay friends, and they say the same thing. They say it's sort of like you cease to exist as you get older. And I wanted to kind of discuss that because it seems to be prevalent in our society. As you get older, you just don't exist anymore.
And one of the things if I may interrupt for just a moment, this was a topic that they talked about on The View this morning.
Oh, they did?
Yes,
okay.
And it's so interesting that you're talking about this, because this was one of their roundtable discussions this morning. I think it's Mel Robbins recently did a podcast, and she talked about the friendships that we form as children. And it's very unique if friendships from our childhood stay with us as we go into each new decade in our life. But she talked about the 20s, for example. The 20s are a time in your life where you're starting to build a foundation of who you are and the people that are part of your life then. And then you go into your 30s. And as we go into our lives, and especially those of us who were in the arts, you go into a show and you may develop new friendships from that show. And then you go on to another show. And sometimes you may not even see those friends ever again. So it's funny, this ebb and flow of what friendships are in our lives. So thank you for bringing this topic up.
Yeah, I don't watch The View, so I didn't know that. But it has been something that you have to deal with as you get older. And the fire situation out here has sort of brought it up for a lot of people, because it's been a moment where people have been reaching out to their friends and acquaintances to check on people. And I've been hearing from a lot of people I haven't heard from in a long time, especially people who have moved away, or people I know in New York and people I know around in London, who are checking in because they don't necessarily understand the geographical layout of Los Angeles. And they see the news and they want to know that, make sure I'm safe, and how close am I to the fires? Have I had to evacuate? And although there are fires not that close, but close enough, I haven't had to evacuate because I'm not really that close to the fires, but I am in the city of Los Angeles. But it is sort of points out the fact that you never really hear from those people until there is something like this. And it sort of makes me think it really is important for us to continue to reach out to people. It is really important to continue to keep those connections, because there are people like myself, and I make a big effort to reach out to my friends and stay in touch and try and get together with people, and try and keep those contacts going. But it's important to remember that there are friends that you have who may not reach out. And it's important to keep that contact with them, because otherwise they're sitting home alone on a weekend doing nothing, waiting for someone to call, waiting for someone to reach out. And one of my very good friends of mine, he's even older than I am, and he's also single and gay. He said it just became so desperately lonely all the time. Wow. Because he would be sitting home alone all the time. He's made huge efforts now to get out there and do things, and he's made all sorts of new friends and pursuing all sorts of new hobbies. But it really was hard for him because as he was getting older, nobody was reaching out anymore.
Well, I also wrote about this morning. I put a posting on my Facebook page because I am really concerned, as we're going into a whole new age on so many levels. And the 3 billionaires who are going to be sitting, on the dais with the new president of the United States, these 3 men, when you think about this, dictate how many people are communicating. Right. Through the news media, through social media and everything. And I think that the stakes have changed a little bit in terms of how people are communicating with each other. Right. Before I bring on our next guest, I want to ask you, in what ways are you reaching out to people? Because I know that we all hope that people are going to reach out to us, but sometimes it takes the effort to reach out. In what ways are you doing that?
I reach out. I actually set reminders for myself in my emails and my calendars to regularly reach out. I have little calendar reminders to say, "Oh, reach out to so-and-so," and I'll do it at least once a month, or set up meeting somebody for coffee every other week, or and I just have a list of friends who I will purposely reach out to, because I know that they're single. They are at home. They're not working all the time. And I try and make an effort to do it that way. And it also ties in a little bit with this customer service thing, which is it's treating people the way you want to be treated. I think Richard, you said that yourself. I worked in retail the entire time that I was in college. And that's why nowadays, because I worked in retail, the customers that I liked helping the most were the ones that were nice to me. So now when I go into a store, especially during the holiday season, when I know it's the craziest, or even if I'm on the phone with somebody who's helping me on the phone, I know that if I'm nice to them and I treat them with kindness, I'm going to get what I need. I'm going to get something back, and one of the tricks that I learned, and I tell people this all the time, is multiple things. If you're having difficulty, one, it's harder for somebody to be rude or unpleasant or unhelpful to you in person. So if you're having difficulty over the phone getting what you need, go in person and deal with them in person, because it's hard to be rude to you in person.
That's good.
And secondly, if you find someone who is helping you in person at a store or at the bank or wherever, and that person's difficult, and I hate to say this, but it really works, whether it's a male or female or whatever, the person whoever is helping you, find something you can compliment them on. Is it a
Absolutely.
piece of jewelry? Is it something they're wearing? Before you start the conversation, say something like, oh, I really love that color on you. It makes you look good. A compliment will immediately click with them and open up the conversation better, and they'll be more willing to help you.
Well, that's great. I want to bring our next guest on. So you're going to help us bring that person on by pulling a number 1 through 3.
2.
And that's our dear friend Sue Matsuki. And she also has her own podcast called Sue's Muse, and which is great. Her latest interview with Tom Dangora is incredible. So kudos to you on that, Sue.
Thank you.
So Sue,
Yes.
you can weigh in on anything that we talked about today.
Well, I've got a lot on my mind, and both you and Donald said treat people the way you want to be treated. That's the cardinal rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But that's really what's making me incredibly weary these days, and totally on my mind is this new wave of unkindness and selfishness and entitlement in how people are now feeling like they can talk to each other. And in New York, for those of you who aren't in New York, there's been this new wave of it being a little more dangerous to ride the trains. And if you're a middle-aged woman with gray hair, you're vulnerable to being pushed, to being lit on fire. I mean, there's just too much of this ugly, ugly, ugly entitled behavior that I'm just not understanding. And yes, you have a right to feel the way you do. You have a right to vote the way you want to vote, 100%. I don't have to have coffee with you, but you have that right. You do not have that right to verbally abuse me for having a different opinion, to physically abuse me, or to, like Donald said, totally ignore me. The whole thing is just weighing on me so desperately that I literally am looking to sell my house and leave the country for a couple years, because I just don't like what's happening across the country, what's happening to all of us, what's happening within our families. All Christmas long, I sang this song from the Wild Party called How Did We Come to This, which doesn't blame either side. It recognizes that, how did we come to this? You say these hateful things to each other, you laugh at each other's opinions, you don't listen to each other anymore. And that was just kind of my little heart statement on being not awed, but being dumbfounded at how we came to where we are right now and how we speak to each other.
Well, I have a theory on it. And my theory is, because I believe in karma, I believe we've created this. And we've created this because, I'm a boomer. I think most of us here are boomers. But as a boomer, there were boundaries placed on me growing up as a kid. And I carried those boundaries through my life. There may be things that I will feel, but I'm not necessarily going to express that to another human being. And I think this idea, just on the Senate floor the other day, 2 congresswomen were screaming, and one of them said to the other, let's take it outside. And these are adults. I'm going back to what Elena said, that our children are hearing this.
Right.
And when you look at the reality shows on television, they're all about bullying, every single one of them. Someone's going to be kicked off the island. Someone's cupcake is going to be made to be worse than someone else's. Someone's design is going to be different. We judge people in what they wear. It's become a pastime. I've seen very close friends of mine post pictures of people that they've snapped a photograph of walking down the street. They don't know what that person's going through.
Yeah, I've seen that with, homeless people on trains, and, they make a joke about it. And I'm like, that's not funny to me. The fact that you feel comfortable posting something like that, it's not funny to me. What was that person's life like?
Well, let me ask you, how do you handle all of this in your own personal life? Are there things that you are doing to help protect yourself? Because I think self-protection is the operative phrase for all of us at this time.
Mm-hmm. Well, when someone comes at me, a friend of mine taught me this. Someone had prefaced something they were going to say with, well, between you and me. And that person put their hand up and they said, if you don't want me to repeat this, I would prefer that you didn't say it to me.
Yes.
And I was like witnessing this, and I was like so impressed with this person setting their own boundaries on. And then another time I saw another friend, and I've used this one, where someone was starting to say something unkind about someone that I knew. And I said, I'm going to remove myself from this conversation because I know this person and they're a friend of mine. And I just walked away. And I don't care that I tweaked them or made them feel a little bit bad at this point. They were perfectly willing to say something horrific about a friend of mine in my presence. And especially if they know that I know that person, that makes it doubly worse, you know. But this whole wave of, you know, it's my right to say what I feel. Well, it's also my right to protect myself. So I'm getting a little bit better with graciously and being very careful with how I set my own boundaries. But the other day I'm in Starbucks and this woman looked like me, could have been me, you know, older woman, gray hair. She said to the young girl behind, you know, the second wave, hey, I've been waiting for a long time. Is my coffee coming up? This turned into a complete racial incident with people pulling out their phones, the girl screaming back at the woman because the woman happened to be white. Oh my goodness. And then even the people who were standing there waiting for coffee were like, she didn't mean it that, you know, and then of course they became part of the racial. It was horrible. I just was like, I don't even want my coffee. I just walked out of the store because I just didn't want that energy around me. And I didn't want to be filmed standing there looking at this. And then if you're there in the room, you get blamed for that opinion, you know. I can't do it anymore. I really need to kind of take a big girl break and go on an island someplace and live in peace with my husband for a while until we can come back and find a way to live here again. So that's just where we are.
Well, Elena, let me ask you, because I don't know this about you. I mean, do you live alone, or do you have someone that you live with? I mean, Sue and I are both very fortunate that we have spouses that we shut the rest of the world out at night, and we watch a movie and Jeopardy. That's our normal night at home. But, you know, Donald brings up a very interesting point, you know, for someone who is alone or something, and how, Donald, I can't even imagine what processing all of that would be like. But Elena, do you live with someone? Do you have a sounding board?
Well, it's interesting that you ask, and thank you for asking. So I related so deeply to what Donald said because I think loneliness is our pandemic. And I don't think it has to do with how you identify. I think it's something that's happening en masse. I have 3 young adult children who are in the process of trying to launch. But because things are so different in this generation than in the prior generations, it's very difficult. And 2 are in the arts. So it's going to take some maneuvering. And so consequently, when one of them said to me today, who lives with me, I'm going to go play board games tonight. I was like, yeah, go play board games. How incredibly healthy is that? And so I just feel like I want to tell Donald, you know, I don't have a partner right now. I dive into my art and I've got 1 cat and 1 dog and 3 young adults that are kind of coming and going. I am lonely. I think a lot of people are lonely, but I also find meaning in making friends with all sorts of people. And sometimes you can't actually find that person you want to connect with and even have coffee with, but it's the moment to moment. It's the guy walking down the street who might be picking up trash that you say hello to, or you know, just somebody at the supermarket or anything. You just keep on engaging because I think
Absolutely.
we're in a
Mhm.
world of loneliness. We're in a
Right.
sea of it.
Well, Sue, I want to get back to you for a second. You know, if there's anything that you want to say to wrap this up before we bring our next guest on.
Well, just that, you know, I totally related also with what Donald said. You know, the older we get, and of a woman of a certain age, when you start losing the attention you got for what you looked like, and now it's this whole other wave about disappearing. And it's funny, I used to say I've lost a substantial amount of weight, but the bigger I was, the more invisible I was.
Wow.
You know, here I am and I'm a big personality. I'm a funny personality, and it's not just you, it's across the board. And I think goes hand in hand with this customer service or lack thereof, and with this new entitlement of how we talk to people. And I just applaud you for getting up every day and trying to connect. Like Elana just said, you know, I think that's all we can do.
That's all we can do.
Mhm.
You're going to bring on our next guest,
Yes,
one or
sir.
two.
Let's go number one.
And you know who that is? That's Lennie Watts.
Oh,
Of course he's number one.
Yeah.
It's Lennie
thank
Watts.
you. Thank
So,
you for
Lennie,
staying,
I
everyone.
mean, is there anything that has been discussed here that you want to weigh in on, or do you want to change the subject?
Well, I was hoping that you would have picked me first, because I've changed my mind about what I've wanted to talk about 40 times. Every time somebody says something, I'm sitting here going, oh, yeah, absolutely. 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 But it all kind of, I mean, for me, a lot of the stuff that has been being said is very much connected to, you know, what's going on in the world. There's just, oh my God. So how long is this show? There's so much, but what I wanted to talk about originally was I've had a bout with people of not taking responsibility for themselves or their actions, and doing things and then just leaving it in other people's laps to deal with, and then going on about their married life. And it comes with family, you know, when we were talking about family and also being lonely, it all kind of fits together in a very strange way. Also goes back to customer service. You know, I mean, it's like I've been on all ends of the customer. Well, you know, Richard, you know, and Sue, you know, I was waiter, I was a bartender, I've sold, you know, I worked in retail, and now I run a nonprofit, and I teach and I direct. And so I am constantly surrounded by people. But I do want to say one thing, Richard. I don't believe the customer is always right.
No, they're
I do
not.
not believe the customer is always right, but it has to be dealt with in a way that, you know, in a professional manner. And I found that in New York City, I don't know how it is around the country, I'm sure it's similar, customer service is virtually non-existent for the most part.
Thank you.
I mean, for the most part, it's just horrible. And then when you get somebody who just basically is doing their job, it's almost like the second coming. It's like, oh my God, you know, but they're basically just doing what they're supposed to be doing. But it's extremely frustrating in the city with customer service and trying to get anything done either on the phone or in person. I do agree with what Donald said about going in you know, that's the whole problem, I think, with social media, is that everybody's, you know, we're 3-4 times removed. So it's easy to be horrible. It's easy to say things that you would never say to somebody to their face, because, you know, this removal makes it so much easier to do that kind of stuff. So I like that idea of you know, if you're having a problem with somebody, go in and make it face to face, because it is much more difficult for people to say, you know, which also goes back to the Sally Struthers thing. It's easier now for her to say what she has to say when she doesn't have to look these people in the face because they're all dead. So I don't agree with that necessarily, Richard. I know I'm all over the place, but you all have made me this way.
No, it's
all of your stuff.
Oh, sure. Blame us.
Yeah. But the thing about the Sally Struthers thing that you brought up earlier, again, it's for me about taking responsibility. You know, I mean, to wait. I mean, why would she wait this long to?
Well, let me weigh in on that for just a moment, because I had a situation years ago that's something that happened in my life. And it was a very hurtful, I'm not going to go into details here, but it was a very hurtful thing that I went through. But it's very much a part of my story. Mm-hmm. It's very much a part of possibly why I respond the way I respond to certain things, the way I do with certain things. And I do not want to bring these names into the forefront because of the repercussions it may cause me. And it's not that I'm sitting waiting for them to die or something, you know, so that I can tell my story. But there are aspects of my story that without it, I can't even tell anything alluding to the story because of what I went through. because if it's even construed of something being implied, it could come back and bite me in the tuchus. So, and one of the things that she said, did you see the article?
I saw some of it, and I saw her being interviewed.
But, one of the things that she said, for example, is in all the years that she was on All in the Family, that Norman Lear and his wife had a big holiday party every year, dinner parties, where the entire cast was invited, and she wasn't invited. And when you know that those things are going on, and I've had people say to me, close friends, are you going to so-and-so's party? And I go, well, I knew nothing about it. I'm sure we've all been in those shoes. And I can understand the pain of, having been on that show and feeling that you were, when I look at the family, All in the Family, I look at this unit of the entire cast. I've never thought of this person being more important than this person when I look at it from a spectator. But to know that all those years that she felt like she was the least important aspect of that show. And this is her story to tell. And,
it is her story to tell for sure. And there's so much gray area in this kind of stuff too. But the fact is, had she said something and had she stood up, maybe she would have been invited to the next year's party.
That's true. That's
no party anymore, So I don't know. I feel like it's hard, and I've been guilty of this on both sides of not saying something and waiting for the longest time. But which also goes back to the self-care thing. As I get older, self-care, mental self-care has become so important to me. Mm-hmm. It's just so, and setting boundaries. And, I work with a lot of people, as you know, and I teach classes, and I'm surrounded by people constantly. And most people are respectful, but there's a lot of people who, if you don't stop them, will continue to cross a line. And if you don't put your boundaries up, and if you don't do that, and I was guilty for years of not putting boundaries up because I wanted everybody to like me. Mm-hmm. And I just was afraid to say it goes back to my childhood and things, which is, we don't have enough time to get into any of that, but it took me a long, long time to be able to say, to realize that no is an acceptable answer. Mm-hmm. I read a meme, I think on somewhere that was like, which is, I don't want to is an accepted excuse. I don't want to. I don't have to explain to you why, but I don't want to. And it took me the longest time to learn that. And I think
was discussed also on The View this morning about Michelle Obama saying, I don't want to go to the inauguration.
Yeah.
And she, for whatever reasons, the fact that she says, I don't want to go to the inauguration is enough for me.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. And you shouldn't have to explain on those kind, And again, a lot of the stuff that you all have talked about, there's so much gray area in all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. I've felt invisible. I actually feel a little less invisible now as I'm older than I did when I was younger. Mm-hmm. I've had weight issues all my life, and I'm gay. Be gay and fat. Oh, that is a party. Mm-hmm. When people like, you chose this life, it's like, no, that is not. I would not have chosen this. This was not a choice. Please believe me. But do you know what I'm saying? It's like, so, but I finally feel like I'm not quite as invisible as I used to be. But I also feel like it's because I have been taking some matters into my own hands to not sink into invisibility anymore, mm-hmm. and putting myself at the table that I was never asked to be at, and asking why am I not at this table, a little bit. And then when you ask that question, you have to be ready to hear the answer. Or be ready to be told no for something, which is also not easy to do.
Right. And that's a very important thing. Let's bring on our next guest, who's been waiting patiently in the wings. He is right here. Josh, you made it.
Here I am. Thank you.
You are.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, Josh, do you want to weigh in on anything that we have been talking about, or do you want to change the subject?
A little of both.
Okay.
I feel like I'm braiding hair, and each of you is part of that braid, and I want to turn it into, the different strands into one. And I will just say that each of you has said things that have inspired me. So I do want to talk about customer service because it's Customer Service Day. I want to blend two things and say Richard, it is the day after the 61st anniversary of Hello Dolly
That's right.
opening, which was yesterday,
Mhm.
which of course Elena would know because it was, the sacred day of January 16th, 1964. And to kind of like go into what Donald said, I mean, like, what's my remedy for being alone? And it has to do with the T-shirt that I'm wearing, and it has nothing to do with spontaneous. I wanted to change. I wanted to put this T-shirt on first and foremost. Okay.
I meddle. Where did you get that?
At Bette Midler's Hello Dolly,
Okay, okay.
she did do it. I mean,
That's funny.
we have to admit that.
Yes.
It's kind of like ring them bells in that Liza Minnelli would sing.
Mhm.
About the fears that go along with living in New York and getting older, absolutely. But I just want to talk about another side of that, which is I've had knee problems over the years and eye problems, and it required me to have a cane for a certain amount of time. And I was astonished that having a specific cane made New Yorkers the nicest people imaginable. But I had to have a cane that had a claw at the bottom as opposed to just like a rubber tip, because one looks kind of medical and surgical. And when people saw that, I never had to ask for a seat. People would just pop right up. And it was the kindness level surprised me, astonished me. So, and then I guess one other part, well, two other parts that very quickly about getting older and not being looked at, and becoming invisible. Um, I think it specifically happened to me at gyms where large parts of the people in the gym are young and have great bodies, and they literally ignore someone who doesn't. And I thought that's just freaky, but I figured, so what? I'll still be friendly. I'll still reach out.
Mm.
And I think that they weren't aware of how that they had this internal phobia of anyone who was not fit and young,
Hmm.
because they turned out to be much more pleasant than I ever had anticipated their being. So, not to go on endlessly about that, I want to talk about customer service, specifically with the person who taught me everything I know about customer service. And that person was Yul Brynner. I was the press agent of The King and I back on Broadway in 1977. And he taught me all the steps that go into paying attention to people who are coming to the theater. He said the experience started when they picked up the phone to order tickets. Well, remember, it was before the internet age. And he went to the phone room of the Uris, now Gershwin Theater, and spoke to the people who answered the phones and said all the things he wanted them to say in his way of saying it. One large one was, we were never to call it a revival. It is a new production. Okay. He was like, yes, My Fair Lady, you can do it a revival. No, The King and I is fresher than ever. It's brand new. And then he went to the box office and chatted and talked up the people in the box office. Okay. Then it goes like, it the experience of going to the theater happens when they hit the sidewalk. Okay. They go into the lobby of this gigantic, unwelcoming lobby of the Uris, now Gershwin Theater. And he said it's too bright and too impersonal. And he made the theater owners change the light bulbs in the lobbies. There are 3 levels of lobby, and there are over 1,000 light bulbs. And they had to replace every single one, 100-watt white with 60-watt peachy pink. Why? Because women look more beautiful in pinky peach light. And it also gave an intimacy to a room that was larger. Another area he would go into is the women's restrooms.
Yay!
And he'd say, people are always talking about the theater, and well, I'm going into his voice, but it's like they keep when we all get together, we talk about the art. But if people are uncomfortable watching the show, they will not appreciate it. Now, The King and I has a really, really long first act, and people really needed to pee. And he thought if people couldn't pee during Act Two, before Act Two, they weren't going to pay attention to it. And that was his concern. Now, they're not going to build more toilets for the people, but he insisted that the intermission be made longer. The King and I clocks in at that time at 2:59. If at three, it goes into overtime. And there were discussions with Richard Rogers, who was alive and there, about how we can cut the show so we can have a longer intermission so we can accommodate more people at intermission. Okay? The displays in the lobby. If you go to the Gershwin Theater right now, they have the Theater Hall of Fame, a big rotunda. But that wasn't there at the time. There were just these big white blank walls. And he didn't like the blank walls. He thought they were ugly and cold. First, he had taken pictures of the show from the wings, and we had a display of the pictures in that room. Further along in the show, he gave each of the children a very large drawing board and colored, like, I'm not sure what you would call it, but they're like liquid and multicolored pens, and said, well, but when you're not on stage, you can draw pictures of what the show looks like to you. And he had these huge drawings by the Royal Siamese children and put them up on the walls of this big rotunda. And then we had an opening of the art gallery. And who was the curator of the opening of the art gallery to the press? Yul Brynner. Who else? So, in every aspect, he cared about the customers, but in a way that maybe we don't really think about customer service usually. It's tiny details of doing everything and his attention to everything. He was focused on so many details that made, when the curtain goes up, he wanted them focused on the show. And that is why. And people, I know the producers of the show never got what he did because they thought it was easily duplicated. It was not easily duplicated. And why did The King and I with Yul Brynner have an impact that Rex Harrison going back to My Fair Lady and Richard Burton going back to Camelot and Richard Kiley going back to Man of La Mancha didn't quite have? Yul Brynner never played to an empty seat at the Gershwin Theater. 933 seats. 1,933 seats, excuse me. So I love the fact that none of it shows and all of it worked. And that is a genius in customer service.
Well, I'm glad that you bring this up. I mentioned this when I did the Mac back to school talk in September. When I'm getting ready to go on and do a show, I think about the steps that brought people to that moment. Because living in Rockland County, we deal with traffic, we deal with gas, we deal with tolls, we deal with parking, we deal with all of these things that happen before we walk into the room. And not only are we dealing with all those things, but now we've got another layer on that, and we've got congestion parking. It's an additional $9 for us to even come into Manhattan to see everything. And, and I have been speaking out against this. The one thing that the new president says he may do is eliminate it. And that's one thing that I'm on the same page with him on, because it's hurting the arts, because it's everything below 60th Street. And with very few exceptions, we have very few theaters or cabaret rooms above 60th Street. So it's the artists that are really going to suffer from all of this. So I hope that we look at all this. But I want to wrap everything up so that we can end on time today. But before I've got a question that I'm going to ask each of you. And then I'm going to give you all a chance to have your final word today, just as like I used to do on the other show. But I'm reading this book now. It's probably turned around, but it's called When the Buck Stopped with You. It's Harry S. Truman and Leadership. And I think that that's another thing that's missing, that we take, Lennie brought it up, that the buck stops with each and every one of us in terms of how we respond to things and how we're putting things out. But I have put together some questions based on things that I've read in the book today. And I'm going to start with you, Elana. And I'm going to ask, what do you need to let go of this year to create space for what you really require in your life this year?
Physically, I need to let go of more papers in my home. I've been holding on to things as a reflex, that I need to have documentation for something. I don't need it anymore. So it just means I need to go through it, toss it, throw it away. And metaphysically, I need to let go of bad feelings.
Well, good for you. Donald, what did you procrastinate on this week?
Oh, I don't think I procrastinated on anything. I don't think there's anything, because I'm kind of one of those crazy people who actually creates a to-do list every night for the next day.
I do too.
I literally do, and I email it to myself. It's really silly, but I literally create an email every night that I email to myself that has a list of all the stuff for the next day, and I make sure I get all those things done every single day. It's the only way I can stay organized, and I do it every single day, and it includes my morning walk, which I do religiously anyway, but I still put it on the list every day. I just do it.
That's
and
good.
I don't miss anything, and I accomplish every single thing on the list.
Sue, what is the best thing that you read this week?
I didn't have much time to read this week. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know, Rich. I didn't really read much this week. You know what? I do know. I'm working on a show that celebrates kind of a lesser known jazz legend, Irene Krall. And she was the sister of Jackie and Roy Krall, the bebop team and everything. And I read her bio, and it really impressed me that at the end of her life, she had finally listened to her own soul on recording and was nominated for 2 Grammys the year before she actually passed away at 46 years of age from cancer. So when I realized that not only did she get married to her second husband and produce these 2 Grammy-nominated jazz CDs, it was all while she was going through chemo in the late 70s, which of course was not like we go through it now. And I was just so humbled by her journey. So I can't wait to put the show up on stage to laud her the way I think she needs to be lauded. So thank you for asking me that. I just forgot what I was reading.
Lennie, what is something that made you proud today?
Something that made me proud today is I had a meeting with somebody, and we were talking about the community that we've built with Signasium in the city, and the amount of people that we reach out to and that we work to. We had you don't always, you're in the middle of doing your stuff, and then you don't realize all of the impact that you have. And we were talking about the gala that we had, and we were talking about the community that we've been building, and that makes me extremely proud.
That's great. Josh, what are you scared of?
Not having the answers and living with not knowing and not necessarily having the tools to find my way.
Wow.
Mm.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to give my final thoughts today, and then I'm going to turn it over to each of you to have your final thought. It could be about anything we spoke about today or a new thought that pops into your head. And what I will do is I will pick the next person, and then that person will pick the next person. And when the last person says goodbye, I will end the show. So you don't have to worry about how do I get out of here. But during the holidays, we lost, one of my favorite people in this business, and that was Linda Lavin. And so I went down this rabbit hole of watching all of these interviews with Linda Lavin. And one of the interviews that she did was an interview that she did during COVID on CBS Sunday Morning. And she was talking about you all may remember this, but the Broadway community came together and they did a live stream celebrating the music of Stephen Sondheim. Mm-hmm. And she heard about this and she wrote and said, how would you like to have Linda Lavin sing The Girl from, the parody, of course, The Boy from Ipanema, from the Mad Show, on your broadcast? And they immediately got in touch with her and said, yes, we would of course love to have you. And she said that she learned in this business that a lot of times people think, well, they're not interested. They're too busy. We can't afford them. We're not going to be able to do this. They're not available. Whatever it is that we put these barriers in front of us. And she said she got what she asked for. And she said, and as far as her career was concerned, her phone didn't ring. She sat there thinking that things are going to happen. But when she picked up the phone and said, I read about this and I want to be a part of this. I'd like to be, and I have been doing that myself and I'm noticing a significant difference. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, the idea that a lot of people may have is that I'm too busy or that I'm not interested or whatever the situation is. Rob Schneider is going to be doing a celebration at 54 Below. Here it is. And look who's on the bottom line, because I reached out and said, I would love to be a part of this if you have the space in your show. And he said, oh my God, I would love for you to be a part of this. I found out that someone is now taking over a venue that I performed in last year in Provincetown. I reached out to them and they booked me. So it's a matter of just getting past those barriers and saying, this is what I want. Are you going to give it to me or not? And Lennie said earlier, be prepared for the answer you may get.
Yeah.
They may not, and it doesn't always open up that they're going to say yes to you, but take chances. I'm going to leave with the same message that I leave at the end of all of my shows. And that's to go out and do something nice today for somebody else without expecting anything in return. As I say at the end of every show, today I'm going to tell everybody, I want all of you to do this. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the fourth name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call. And let that person know the impact that they've made on your life. And by doing this, what you're going to do is you're going to make an impact on their life. Our dear friend, Sean Moniger, he always says we're all in the same storm, but we're in different sized boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave and I'm going to turn it over to you, Lennie. And when you finish, you'll pick the next person.
All right.
Thank you. And see you next week.
All right. I just want to say that this was so thought-provoking what everybody said today. It was nice to be on a panel that had nothing to do with cabaret and like to talk about like real things and real life people with real life people. And it really made me think about a lot of stuff. And it also made me feel really great that every one of you touched on something that I'm actually thinking about and that's going on right now in my own life, whether it be about being lonely or family or career, any of that stuff, and what you were afraid of with Josh, about being afraid of. I mean, it's just really thought provoking. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for opening up and talking about this, and not just talking about how do you get booked at Don't Tell Mama on a Tuesday. So I just think it was great. And the thing that Richard said, it has taken me, I just turned 63, and it's taken me almost 60 years to be able to ask for things. And things have really come because I've actually just asked. Including this, I just moved into a new apartment because I happened to ask if there was anything available. And so you have to ask, be prepared for the answer, but you never know what you're going to end up with. So that is a new lesson for me, and hopefully imparting that on other people, that just put yourself out there and ask for what you want and ask for what you need. And that's it. This has been lovely. I will turn it over to Donald.
Oh, thank you. It's been a joy to spend time with all of you. One of the things that I always tell people is, we're all just sharing this giant rock hurtling through space, and it doesn't cost anything to be kind and to be nice to other people. And being unpleasant is just takes too much energy, and life is too short for that. So, and I'm a firm believer in getting people who are negative and hurtful out of your life, because negative energy in your life is just a waste of time. And it's always good to surround yourself with nothing but positive people. And today has been great because it's been spending time with positive people. So I really appreciate it. And I hope to join you all again sometime very soon. So I'm going to pass the torch to Sue.
So I just want to say that a big takeaway for me was what Lennie said in terms of pulling your own chair up to the table and asking for what you need, and reiterating that the boundaries that you set are everything in terms of how you can learn how to be kind in a situation that's overwhelming sometimes. So I would just leave everybody with, the David Friedman song, "We can be kind, we can take care of each other." Remember that we all need the same things. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Hi, I'd like to close with the most important lesson that Yul Brynner taught me. I was 28 years old, and the circumstances around it were difficult and challenging. He said, admitting you do not know something is the beginning of knowledge. I think up to that point, I thought admitting you didn't know meant that you were stupid. But in point of fact, it's the opening of many, many things. And I have used that lesson for decades. Okay. Happy New Year, everyone. Bye.
I guess it's just me here. I'm so proud to have been with these wonderful people and maybe met a few new friends. And I know we're all interconnected in different ways. I loved Josh's stories about Yul Brynner. I don't think I will ever think about him without that backstory. And I hope we can all be kind to our customer service people in our lives. Just be patient with them. If they don't have the answer, just try to be polite. And don't swear at them on the phone unless you have to. Have a great day. Bye.